I was really excited to be able to be invited here, and it's very hard. I teach, so this, the academic year is just hard to get things done. It's just tough. And I said, I'm going to come read at UNH, and I'm going to finish a story. So I have been kind of cranking this thing out and trying to get it right for this reading. I'm a little nervous because it's a brand new story, but I'm going to give it a shot. I don't think I need to say anything else because it's a story. I'll just say that I did feel strongly as I began this that I wanted to write from the point of view from someone who's not me. And you'll hear pretty quickly how this person is not me. And I wanted to write from the point of view of someone who might be considered on the face of it unlikable. So this story is called The Modern Era. 6 months with her was long enough. 6 months was longer than I wanted to be with any woman, even one as pretty as Mary Ann. We were not a decade out of college, my friends and I. We liked to drink. That was our primary activity. We drank at brunch, and we brunched several times a week, and we drank at dinner, and we ate out together most nights. Mary Ann was not one of us. She didn't drink or go to comedy clubs or bars or want to be an actor or a writer or a comic. She had not gone to college. She was a receptionist at my dentist's office. I loved my dentist. His name was Dr. Guerra. He had an exceedingly quiet voice and slow, small, methodical hands, and he was tall and trim, like a dancer. I admired the linen wallpaper in his office and his glossy succulence. His receptionist, too, who sat behind the desk looking faintly alarmed. You could say she dressed like an immigrant. Kmart jeans and generic athletic shoes, but she was white from Nebraska. Her bras were tiny but industrial. She was the only person I knew who'd grown up in a trailer park, and the only person I knew who sent money home. Not a trailer park, she said, a motorhome lodge. The distinction struck me as noble and pitiful. I feared going to this place. I did not want to meet Mary Ann's parents. The day I planned to break up with Mary Ann, I woke up with another woman on my mind, a redhead who appeared in my dream that night. I want to say I invented her, and I suppose I did, but she resembled a TV star of the moment because I was not very original. The TV star was on billboards, lit from beneath at night. The woman in my dream resembled this actress, but she was not this actress. And I wanted her, this woman who did not exist, and I did not want Mary Ann. I messaged Kyla and Chris S. and Chris K. and Lucy that I was going to break up with Mary Ann and meet them afterward for a drink. Oh, really? Poor Mary Ann, such a sweetheart. But they didn't know her well, had said hello only a few times, and Lucy said, we'll drink to your sorrows. We've missed you, baby. I'd miss them too. It would be good to be back in the fold. We were like sitcom friends. Of course we were. Raised on sitcoms, now auditioning and writing for them. We modeled our life on these shows. Our friendship group had its own cultures, traditions, holiday specials, ancillary friend groups. Some of us had trust funds. Most of us were white. We dated each other sometimes or dated a member of a side group and then came back and cracked jokes about it. Mary Ann was a short arc. She didn't have a TV or a computer. She had no aesthetic, and she was not funny. She thought stand-up was braggy, but my friends had understood. They had not begrudged my nights away because she was sexy, they agreed, in a complicated way, like a sexy Anne Frank. I called her at work. Can I pick you up at 4? I think we should go for a walk. Yes, please, she said. I'd like that very much. Mary Ann was wrong to have it bad for me. I was the oldest of 3 blonde boys from the suburbs of Philly. I had been given an Audi on my 16th birthday. I kept a list of the women I slept with, most of whose names I remembered. Mary Ann's name on the day I prepared to break up with her wasn't the last one. Mary Ann had no list. She kept a diary instead. She read historical novels and Time magazines from Dr. Guerra's office. I had never known someone who wasn't a grandmother to read Time. She slept in a long nightgown, a column of tiny, non-working buttons on its bib. She would never try cocaine or bubble tea, and she would not come to the nude Korean baths, which I considered one of the great wonders of Los Angeles, and she ate fluff sandwiches and minute rice and all that trashy Midwestern paste. In bed, she was girlish, shy. hot with shame. Sometimes she giggled or snorted with embarrassed laughter. She hadn't gone down on me yet or let me go down on her. It's the modern era, I wanted to say. Her goodness, her nervousness de-sexed her. I didn't want the job of her. Don't you want to be something? I asked her once early on. I felt I could be bold with her. Nothing I said seemed to hurt her. I have a job, she'd replied, shrugging. We were in her apartment. She lived on a street in Hollywood that reminded me of grayest Manhattan. She was sweeping the buckling linoleum floor, and I was sitting on a chair, drinking a beer and watching her. She wore pink canvas sneakers. She had a cheap corn husk broom which disintegrated as you swept so that you ended up sweeping the broom pieces, so that the chore just went on and on. Don't you want more than a job? I have more than that, she said, and rested the broom against the wall, came over to sit on my lap. She wore tiny earrings, fake pearls, the kind Puerto Rican toddlers wear. We couldn't even watch TV together. She had the worst taste, loved the battling pastry chefs. At night, she rubbed Vaseline on her elbows and on the soles of her feet. She washed her face with a bar of orange dial. When she called Nebraska, she spoke to her father in low, soothing tones. A drunk, I presumed. I knew that voice. That was how you talk to a drunk, but I didn't ask because I didn't want to know. I was not interested. I smoked cigarettes outside. I liked the drive to Dr. Guerra's office. I liked seeing the Santa Monica Pier, the Ferris wheel turning over the ocean. I liked knowing there were sharks out there. Not a lot of the time, no, but there could be sharks, and a person could theoretically be mauled or eaten. That this horror might happen in such proximity to Dr. Guerra's office disturbed me pleasantly. She was waiting out front, standing on the curb, slightly pigeon-toed, her big purse hooked on her elbow. I kissed her hello. This would be the last time I'd kiss her. In the car, she told me a story about a boy who'd come into the office that day under the impression the dentist was going to remove his teeth. Clean them, Marian had explained, but he didn't seem to understand. The kid looked so sorrowful, so resigned to indignity. Dr. Guerra gave his Thursdays to the underserved community. Sanctuary dentistry, he called it. Poor kid, she said, gazing out the window. Well, that poor kid has the best dentist in LA, I said. He's got that. She said, I didn't go to a dentist until I was 14. There was no pity in her voice, no expectation for pity. Sometimes she did that, leveled an awful fact on me with a kind of bemused indifference. She never saw a dentist, or the bus driver fondled her, other rotten things, but spoken so calmly, so acceptingly, it made me almost sick. We were driving to Griffith Park. That would be a good place to do it, I thought. She would not make a scene there. But the ride was too long and traffic was worse than usual, and I realized halfway there I should have found a nearer park, but then it was too late to turn around. I considered doing it right there, in the car, in steamy traffic, except that struck me as indecent. And so we went on, and since Marian never had too much to say, I was the talker, we passed the ride in mostly silence. When we arrived at Griffith Park, there was a sign, parking full, no parking beyond this point, shuttle to observatory, 25 cents. I'd been hoping to find a spot close to the top, and I didn't like this extra step. Complicated transit would make the breakup harder, add to the awkwardness. But there we were, and so I parked, and we walked to the place where the shuttle came, a dusty cutout on the side of the road. A Chinese family with an ancient grandmother stood there waiting. There were 6 of them. The grandmother wore beautiful red silk shoes covered with roadside dust like something you'd see on a movie poster. Only a quarter? Nothing costs a quarter anymore, Marian said to me. She seemed genuinely happy. Nothing indeed, said the man whose arm was linked with the ancient woman's. Cheerful murmurs percolated among the family. For a few minutes they spoke amongst themselves about the price of things. Marian held a quarter between the thumb and index finger of each hand and had a wary smile on her face and red cheeks like a child in line for the scariest ride at the fair. More people joined us to wait. 2 women spoke loudly about the national darkness. They called him the Duck. The crowd hummed with excitement. The crowd hummed with agreement. Even the grandmother lifted a bony ancient finger in solidarity. The impeachment hearings were in their infancy those days, and everyone walked around, peaceably raving. I wish we could go somewhere and not hear about him, Marianne whispered in my ear. Can you take me to the desert this weekend? I've got a busy weekend. Someplace where he's not screaming. Take me there. There's no place like that left, I said. Her parents in Nebraska had voted for him, she told me. Mine did too, but I didn't tell her this because I never spoke of my parents to her. Mine were investment bankers who'd held their noses. Hers were Second Amendment freaks charmed by the gold-plated toilet. The toilet was clever, I thought, a symbol of his wealth and his way of shitting on the wealthy. He was a master of having it both ways. The man got what he wanted. The shuttle arrived and we all crammed on. There were only a few seats on the sides and the old people and children took them. Marianne was too short to reach the handrail, so I held her. In this way, I took responsibility for us both. I wanted to be a good boyfriend to the end, to look like one. The shuttle smelled of gas and industrial cleaner. It wheezed its way up the mountain switchbacks. I'd been on this road many times, and so I did not participate in the appreciation of nature along with everyone else. I prepared what I was going to say. Then, to gather my nerve, I thought about the redhead. But I forgot that Marianne had never been to the observatory before. I had failed to realize that this iconic place would be new to her. And so when we arrived, when we got to the center of the courtyard, to that highest place above the city, Marianne stopped walking. She blinked, turned in a circle. It was only then, watching her take in the view, the Hollywood sign, the telescopes, the sun beginning its descent, that I understood how unkind it was to do it here. This was a landmark. I would ruin it for her. What had I been thinking? Who orchestrates a destination breakup? Which was actually funny. I made a note to use that. Oh, Tanner, she cried, Tanner! Because she had come from the plains, of course. She had never seen such a view. She pointed to Spanish roofs. She pointed to City Hall, to all the cars below, to downtown. She marveled at the color of the sky. Like a jelly bean, she cried, oh, Tanner! And yes, I thought about holding off, going down after sunset, grabbing dinner at a Chinese dive I liked in Los Feliz. We could break up over lo mein. I considered this, but would it have been kinder? I imagined the awkwardness of the fortune cookies. I didn't expect she'd stay in the city for much longer. She'd return to Nebraska and lick her wounds. There'd be a new receptionist at Dr. Guerra's office. Marianne would find a much better match in Nebraska. She could pick anyone she wanted back there. Surely any doughy ex-quarterback would kill for her, any sweetheart cop. I wanted this for her. I wanted her to go away and also somehow to remain the receptionist. We paused at an overlook, darkening pink sky, bloody at the horizon. A postcard, Marianne said, isn't it? She made her hands the shape of a postcard and looked through them. The slashes of light on the ground were the streets where I met my friends. Love for the city filled my heart. Love for the city vanquished her winsomeness. I said what I had prepared to say. I'm sorry, you deserve better, not ready for commitment, not ready for monogamy. Monogamy. I used that word several times. It was such a welcome addition to the breakup toolbox. An ideological word, something to strenuously consider. People were polyamorous those days, the way they were vegans. It was a way to ethically sleep around. I said, I don't think monogamy is working out for me right now, and I feel I should be honest. I tried it, I gave it a shot. I went on, and she listened without expression. Then she said, I wanted to go to the desert this weekend. Are you saying you want to see other people, like along with me? Me and other people too, or you want me gone? I'd really like to go to the desert. I said, I don't want you gone, Marianne. That's so extreme. Why do you have to say it like that? She raised and lowered her bony shoulders. Her expression was baleful, pale. She looked exactly as I'd feared, prettily stricken. It's easy to get sentimental about pretty people, I told myself. Be done, in and out. But I found myself dissembling. I said, I need some space, that's all. I need to think. Give me some time. I'm not saying we should end it permanently, but a break. We're just so unalike, you and me. She blinked. But you're just like me, she said. You're a goddamned extraterrestrial, I wanted to say, and then I did. I held my breath, waited for her response, but it didn't seem to faze her, which only made me more committed to ending it. She said, if I drank, if I went to bars with you, would you keep me around? Why do you put it that way? You want to be kept around? Why are you so needy, Marianne? Jesus, you're way too pretty to be so needy. I used to drink, she said, finally, resolvedly. I can do it again. I used to, beer in my bedroom, all alone, and then vodka. You realize how compliant you are? Why are you like that? But I'm like you, she said. I keep telling you. Her eyes were glassy, but didn't leak. You're making me angry, I said. Your obedience, your devotion to such a shitty person. I wanted her eyes to leak, wanted those tears to spill over, and so I told her then about the 2 women I'd slept with during the 6 months we'd been dating. I told her about Vivian, about Vivian's private piercings, and about the woman I met at the Magic Castle, whose name I never got, who appeared on the list only as Magic Castle. I told her about the list. I was a pig, I swore it. I substantiated my argument. Oh, she said, taking a step back. You did those things? I did, I said. I do. I misunderstood, she said. I thought... She began to cry but fought it, pawed ruthlessly at her eyes. She made a bleeding sound, covered her mouth, looked down. She stayed like that for a bit. When she raised her head again, she looked calmer. She looked calmer, tired, and she said in a calm, tired voice, I'll miss you, Tanner. I'll miss you too, I told her, and maybe I would miss her, but I'd never have to go to Nebraska, never set foot in the double wide. A glorious never thrummed in my body. I would never have to bring her to my parents. She would not see the picture of me on the piano, never see my child face, helpless before an ice cream cone in a silver frame. Good riddance, Marianne, you pathetic creature. Those were the words that passed through my brain. I believed I was owed more. There was an insane person on the shuttle down. A middle-aged man, 2 kids with him, Indian or maybe Pakistani, and he said things like, oh God, we're gonna die. Oh man, he's going too fast. Oh no, this isn't good. Oh no, oh hell, too fast. No one else spoke. The shuttle descended. And it did feel treacherous, dark, and the pitch was steep and the brakes whined, but people do not fly off the road in Los Angeles. Much too fast, the crazy man said. This thing can't handle it. I know machines. This is not a safe machine. One of his kids was very young, elementary aged, and played with his phone. The other boy was a teenager. Okay, Dad, the teenager said, we're safe, everything's good. Do you hear that? Too fast. Marianne could reach her handrail now, the handicap one, so I didn't have to hold her. Everything was over and done. We'll fly off, the insane man said. That lady, and he gestured to Marianne, closest to the door, she'll fly out. I felt my chest get hot. Marianne was still under my purview. I was angry that he put her in his imagination, that he would throw her out of this vehicle, even in words. No one's flying out, said the teenager. She might. And I put my arm around her shoulder, around Marianne's shoulder, but she pulled away. The crazy father saw this. He smirked at me. Marianne surprised me. She looked at the man, and she did not smile, and she said, I will not fall out. I took out my phone. Several messages from my friends inquiring about the state of things, hurrying me along. They were leaving the Good Luck Bar and heading to Bigfoot's. Sometimes a celebrity would appear at Bigfoot's and everyone would suck in their guts and throw back their shoulders and perform normalcy. I wanted that. I wanted that forever, to be coming up, to wonder every morning how it would turn out. Maybe I would be one of those people someday, someone you couldn't feel normal around. That seemed the very best thing in the world. I wanted it for all of us, for me and my friends. I wanted to get it and confer it on them. And I wanted to get it and confer it on them. You couldn't date a girl like Marianne if you were a person like this. You certainly couldn't marry her. You guys with me? Okay. As soon as we were back in the car, the mountain was impossible to fathom. Neither of us spoke. I felt like I was driving my daughter in a car without seatbelts. No one seemed safe or out for anyone but themselves. I felt that I'd been assigned the task to care for this girl, and I was too jealous to give the task to another man, but couldn't do it myself. Food trucks everywhere, nowhere wasn't a restaurant. And movie billboards, unavoidable, the redhead on one of them, out there, somewhere in the city, that otherworldly swell of cleavage, that anorexic clavicle. Marianne's street was shitty, but I suppose it was better than a trailer park. There was a head shop next door called Dios Mio, and an Iranian grooming store where once she got her eyebrows botched. I'm fine, Tanner, she said when I pulled up in front. She unbuckled her seatbelt. You shouldn't worry about me. You shouldn't feel guilty. I'm fine. And she seemed fine. I said I was glad. I said again I was sorry. I was sure I would never see her again. Then she said, what about your boots? My boots. I'd forgotten my favorite boots, brown leather lace-ups, leather soles, Italian. She called them my Civil War boots. Maybe she was funny, or maybe it was a broken clock situation. They were by her bed, the boots. I'm so glad someone got that. Good, I wondered. Maybe she was funny, okay. They were by her bed, the boots. All at once I didn't trust myself. Why would I leave my boots there? I felt sick. Sick suddenly, like I might vomit. Sour air filled my sinuses. She said, "Stay here, I'll be right back. I'll get them." And she leapt from the car and hurried up the walk, up the stairs, to her studio apartment. She moved with such purpose up the stairs. Her twin bed was up there, her purple sheets, her dresser top. She had almost nothing, just an alarm clock, a water glass, her communion cross on a gold chain. She lived like a survivor of a natural disaster in a room at the YMCA. I gripped the steering wheel and took long breaths until the nausea began to fade. On our first date, I'd taken her to sushi. She didn't understand wasabi and ate the whole bowl, then ran to the bathroom crying. Later, she said her mouth hurt too much to kiss. I made her kiss me. In the morning, her lips and the skin around them was raw and scabbed. Dr. Guerra gave her some prescription steroid cream. "Wasn't that nice of him?" she kept saying in the car on the way home, the metal tube cupped in her hand. "I'd have paid $100 at the clinic for that. Wasn't it awfully nice of him, Tanner?" Did she have a crush on the dentist? I wondered but didn't worry. I admired Dr. Guerra, trusted him, and I knew he was too decent to exploit her. He was like a father. The way he tilted his head and examined her poor, sore, burned mouth was how a father does, how a father is supposed to do, which made him, I supposed, my father-in-law. When Marianne came back in the car, she had my boots in a plastic bag. The bag was from a Mexican place where we sometimes got takeout. I gave her the empty bag, but I still felt like I might throw up, so I said, "Give it back," and stuffed it between my thighs. She looked at my crotch, expressionless. Her face was empty of feeling. I did not like this. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll get over it." "You will? Doesn't everyone?" I did not know this practical Marianne. I did not know her at all. "Don't go, Marianne," I said. "What?" "Please don't." "You're the one who's going," she said. It was true. It was plain to see. I was sitting in the driver's seat, buckled in, the car running. My beloved boots were in the passenger seat. Nothing felt truer than this. Nothing was holding me back. I love my wife so much. It amazes me that I almost gave her away. I turned off the car, I unbuckled, I got down, and I got out, and I knelt down, my knee on the oily pavement, and I asked her to marry me. Her face was calm and blank, no fold between her eyebrows. She said, "I don't know." And then we looked at each other, and then finally, she spoke. "I will," she said. I felt so sorry for her. I told her so. "Feel how you like," she said. We went to Bigfoot's and announced our engagement. My friends were stunned, but after a few drinks, it all seemed rather hysterical. We clinked glasses and danced, and Lula, the bartender, played the songs we asked for, gangster rap and Dolly Parton, the last blast of irony for a very long time. Because I didn't know we'd actually moved to Nebraska. I didn't know that I'd find myself in a cul-de-sac with 3 daughters. 3 girls in an above-ground pool in which 2 sisters would swim in a circle, creating a whirlpool so that the little one, in for her inflatable pink vest, could spin. I didn't think we'd really get married. I only knew that I didn't want her to go and that I had to fix the cruelty of the evening, and that's what I came up with because I am not very original. I drank and she drank. We drank a good deal. This would continue for a long time. I drank a Negroni, then 2. They had set upon her, my girlfriends, those waifish and fey women, women with headshots and podcasts. I had slept with half of them. All night they circled Mary Ann, gazed at her with new attention. They stroked her sleeves, her hair, examined her with comic reverence, pretending they were new sisters, professing their sister love in high, parodic voices. And Mary Ann looked so anxious again, being touched like that. I liked that she looked anxious again. I liked that the drink had turned something down in her face. I was starting my 3rd Negroni when the redhead walked in. There she was. Not the dream woman or the celebrity, but a kind of better amalgam, real and not real, herself and made for me. And everyone was busy with Mary Ann, and no one was paying attention to me, and so when the redhead moved toward the bathroom, I found myself following her. A woman like the redhead knows when she is being followed, which is all the time. And so she stopped and turned. We stood facing each other in the back hall of Bigfoot's. There was an old payphone still mounted on the wall. Next to it, a framed needlepoint sampler said, "Call your mother." She had done something complicated and geometric with her eyeliner, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I said, "You look familiar." She had a lovely neck, long and white, with a mole marking the spot you'd like to kiss. She tilted her head. "I'm no one," she said, smiling. "I'm sure that can't be." "Well, I'm a doctor." "A doctor?" "I am, in fact, a real one," she said. "Nephrology." She spoke the word lustily. Her eyes were green. "Kidneys," she said, and gestured to her own, and there was never a more erotic word uttered. "You operate on people?" I asked. "Sure," she said, "but I can do other things too." My betrothed waited for me. "Don't make me be with Mary Ann," I wanted to say to the doctor. "Stop me." She was a polyamorous doctor, or playing one, and I didn't care. I wanted her. You have to understand how terribly I wanted her. "Save me," I wanted to say. "I don't want to meet Mary Ann's pastor. I don't want to hold her hair when she vomits in the parking lot. I don't want to see her discount shampoo on the edge of my bathtub or her cans of chili in my cabinet." There was a feeling in the air that usually precedes touch. I felt it. We looked at each other. The camera held. Do it, I thought. I spoke to her with my mind. Do it. "Do what?" she said. For I had spoken aloud, but whether it was fear or love that stopped me, I don't know. All I know is that I could not say a word. I had to extricate myself, which I did, which I know does not deserve a medal. I know it is disgusting that men want to be praised for behaving like decent people, and yet I do want to be praised. That's what I want. I want you to see how bad I was, how sorry and rotten, to see the strength it took for me to turn away. I didn't think I had that strength, and I knew if I could turn away from the redhead, could find that in me, then I could really marry Mary Ann. She's so able-bodied, my wife. Never a headache in 18 years, never a complaint. She's a hygienist now. Once my oldest daughter asked my wife what it had been like. She is interested in chaos and perversion like all teenagers. Back then, she meant, back when the duck got cooked. Did she resist? Did she march? No, my wife said. I did not. There was neither pride nor apology in her voice, and my daughter was clearly disappointed. She made a little judgmental sniff. They do not respect their mother as much as they should, these girls. They do not understand her. They should be thankful their mother did not resist, for they would not be here if she had. We would not have this life. A woman like that would never have saved me. Thank you. What was I getting? I know. I mean, this is a draft, and I'm really thinking about how and when to kind of push forward in time, and I'm still not 100% sure about it. I feel like the pieces here or there, but I'm not quite sure how. But I was trying to think about leaping forward, and rather than leaping forward with the kind of, this is the overview of my life, I just like the idea of like, what is the kind of emotional core, the sort of the heart of his life in that moment later. And I just think of these 3 children in a pool, and I just think of what I did as a child, which was swim in a circle so someone else could sort of, in one of those above ground circular pools. I was just sort of thinking about what I could leap forward to, and that came, I don't know. So I wasn't thinking about sort of this sort of symbolic significance of the whirlpool or anything. But I mean, did it make you think of anything?
I don't know. It just seems so specific. I just wondered if it had like a symbolic.
I know.
I don't know, the togetherness of girls.
I think I like that idea, right? Like this group of girls that, I just like the idea that somehow he would wind up with a bunch of daughters. Seemed funny to me in a way. Like, I don't know. And I'm still thinking about those leaps forward, whether and how they work, if they work.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, can people kind of get stuck in whirlpools like that? I mean, that's what my mind went to.
Oh.
Like because you can get stuck in whirlpools, right? But that's not my question.
It's dark. I didn't know.
It is. So I'm just curious, so you're saying this is like, I loved it, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
It was great. And
That's a really good question. I haven't, there aren't other structural versions, like laden with symbolic meaning, and I was much bigger, and so this revision has kind of collapsed that. But in terms of one of these stories that kind of both, I feel like it's all there, you know, I had no intention of marrying Marianne. Like, it's sort of the first sentence is the marriage in a way, even though he's protesting for a long, long time. Did you think they'd really get married? No.
It's totally not.
Right. So I think, yeah, so that's all I would say. So structurally, the story's always been like this, but with bigger pieces in the middle. And I always just imagined that it was sort of there, but he didn't see it, was the idea.
Right.
Well, I mean, I read things before they're published, you know. I've definitely read things when they're kind of done, but not published yet. And I wouldn't if I felt like I had someone read this to make sure I wasn't going to humiliate myself, but maybe I did. I don't know. But I do feel like when I'm reading at an institution like this of kind of learning, and it's a school, I kind of feel a responsibility to be a little vulnerable and show students sort of my work in progress. If I'm if I'm out promoting something, obviously it's different. But here I feel like because they're students, I'm willing to do that. And I also feel like someone might just say something to me afterward that will really help me. So I do feel, though, yeah, I thank you for acknowledging the kind of risk in that, because I do feel a little bit uncomfortable right now. Sure, and I think like getting into any character's headspace, it's a kind of concentration, a kind of just sort of slowing down and just letting the sentences teach me who a person is, really just sort of being still with my sentences and not imposing too much on the page or on the character, and letting a voice kind of unfold. And so I think I was getting tired and worried that I was hearing a lot my students talk about likable characters or relatable characters, and this like maddening notion of relatability just was coming up again and again. So I think I made it a point I wanted to sort of stay with a character who's sort of who wasn't easy to relate to for me, but whose pain felt ultimately. The way I can kind of find the voice of someone who's not so likable is by acquainting myself with their pain. I don't know if his pain comes through here, but I feel it right now a little bit, and I feel that there's a lot that he won't say, that he's sort of holding back. And so I took a lot out once I sort of learned about a lot more about him, and there's a lot more backstory, but I've sort of pulled it out, hoping that the kind of present action is the thing that reflects his pain. But that's the way I go in, sort of through a voice. I didn't know what was going to happen, but through so finding this voice. But really this idea of just hearing a lot about, well, the character's not likable, or I can't relate, or I thought, well, plus I was spending a lot of time in LA with these wonderful people, with comics, right? With comics and writers, and I sort of found myself in this little friend group in LA, and I was just bewildered by their life. They're all wonderful, but they have these sort of 20-somethings in LA who have a very different life than I have, or than Marianne had, and I didn't want to get into the life, but I wanted someone kind of on the perimeter of that life. I think there's a line, I took it all out, but he says like I was not untalented. Like I think this is a person who was not untalented but wasn't going to make it in kind of LA. I don't know. Mm-hmm. No, I don't believe in tone deaf, and I do believe like dialogue, like anything else you work at and you do get better. Because my early dialogue was terrible. In fact, my little son is learning how to play the trombone, and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to pretend this isn't on, and say that I worried that my son was tone deaf and that he wouldn't be able to learn to play the trombone because he's not a person who can hold a tune singing. But then when he picked up the trombone, it was amazing because it took a little more time, but of course he learned how to play the trombone, and he can hear. But he and I both kind of wondered if maybe he was, what is tone deafness? Is there such a thing as tone deafness? I say all that because, so anyway, he learned the trombone, and we thought he wouldn't really be able to. And I think so many of my students are convinced that they're just tone deaf when it comes to dialogue, or that's just what they're bad at, and they're not, and so for me, so I don't think that's true, but there's something really hard about it. But the way I write it is I overwrite it, and I just sort of lay it all on, and I sometimes will have my characters say the things to each other that they can't say. Like I'll say the things that they would never say. I just lay it all on, and then it's a process of weeding and extraction. And that's sort of how I find those that I'm interested in kind of clipped, elliptical, funny dialogue and the sparse dialogue. But that, of course, you can't do on. So maybe you think you're bad at dialogue because there's a kind of, well, it doesn't come out like that, but of course it doesn't. It requires an enormous amount of pruning, I think. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents about that. I shared a little of that in Clark's class earlier today. Just a kind of moment of real despair when I was writing my first book, and it was a real crisis of faith, and I was kind of ready to it was just so hard, and I was ready to just give it up. So I had those moments of sitting in the car. I described sort of sitting in the car, kind of in the woods, just quietly weeping, convinced that I was done because I couldn't figure out how to make that book work. So there's the regular failures, like, rejections from magazines, finally getting a book published, and then going to give a reading at your college, at your alma mater, like a bookstore right across the street from your college, and not a single person showing up. There are those kinds of like painful failures that every writer goes through, just not having people show up at readings. There's no writer who hasn't dealt with that, or having, but for me, the hardest things to overcome are the being stuck in the middle of something and thinking, I don't think I have the chops to finish this. I don't think I have the kind of wherewithal to finish that. Those are the scariest, hardest moments. That they're not exactly. They're sort of they're a kind of a dangerous kind of anticipation of failure. This and I'm kind of live there. But then that's why I always try when I'm working on a novel, which just takes so long to write these stories so that I can have a feeling of something being kind of done, or finding a way to complete a world. Because if I don't have that sense of something being done, I feel that uncertainty of the bigger project and the possibility of failure can be really paralyzing, for lack of a better word. I think it's both and all of the above, but I think for me, I think when I'm generating, it's catch as catch can. It's let's see what happens. Sort of, no, I don't have a sense of I need to get this many words done. I just want to sort of make something out of nothing and get a thing going. And then it's, all right, I'm going to work Tuesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, so it's both and. And I had my students yesterday it was a introduction to fiction writing, undergrads, and they're all into it, and they're all really they're making good things happen on the page, and they just said, we want to talk to you about something, sort of a end of the class, like anything we need to talk about. Like, yeah, it's impossible to find time to write and do my other classes, and also this, and I just said, yes, we're in the struggle together. Yes, it never stops. It's always hard. There's no way around that, right? But I could feel that it was. I think my students were kind of surprised that I was right there with them in that struggle, and it felt good to share it with them. And I realized I should like normalize that a little bit. Well, I think so. You're pretty much a nonfiction writer in the nonfiction program. I think that when I've been writing a lot of fiction, and then maybe something happens that feels like this is an essay, I have to get this into an essay form, which happens sometimes for me. It feels utterly thrilling because there's a constraint that kind of exists that I am able to hook into. There is the thing that really happened, there's a set of relationships, there's a set of order, I don't have to invent from nothing, and it feels so exhilarating. And I love the constraint, which gives me strangely, kind of paradoxically, a feeling of freedom. There's reality, and I'm getting to kind of participate in reality. So when I leave that though and come back to fiction, which is maybe more what you're talking about, and maybe you can find a similar kind of delight in the openness and the kind of the enormity of the kind of the project. There's nothing that I think the challenging thing about fiction, maybe if you're coming from if you're in a sort of program as a creative nonfiction writer, is that or a journalist or someone who's working with the real, is that sort of you still have to create the kind of constraint in the fictional world. You have so many decisions to make when you write fiction. Like sort of who is speaking and why and to whom and in what moment in space and time. And not that you don't have to make those decisions as a writer of nonfiction, but there's a kind of establishment of the kind of level of reality when you're writing fiction that you can do anything with. And so I guess my advice or the tip would simply be to embrace that openness, don't bypass the kind of problem of setting up the sort of constraint for yourself, because it's hard to know how to do it, but kind of embrace the freedom you have to make anything. The problem is when people write fiction, when they're used to writing creative nonfiction, that openness can sometimes feel, I think, and for me, when I go back, can feel really destabilizing. And just to kind of think about embracing that, or sort of, I don't know, I've lost my train of thought, but that's kind of, I think there's something about kind of creating the rules of your world in fiction that one has to do whenever you write anything. But when you're not kind of bound to the real, it's an exciting and scary, I think, thing to do. Maybe I'm not giving a tip as much as kind of acknowledging the challenge and the possibilities of that kind of movement back and forth.
Technology and that sort of.
Well, I don't know that I think that it's funny because in this story, this takes place very much in the now. This takes place in a future. I mean, there's a character here looking back from the future at a time that's even in the future. So you'd think there'd be a lot of, but there's not much in here except kind of people messaging each other. Like I'm very uncertain about how to use technology. It's not that I'm necessarily ambivalent. I think every project demands its own kind of reckoning with technology. Now, in that story, I was quite interested in this idea of a world before, when such a thing would still be possible as a raffle and a salesman coming to town. It seemed like that's over. That doesn't happen any longer. And I was interested in this idea of like when a moment when that kind of a encounter could just sort of happen. And that could be so intimate, but unmediated by technology. So 73 is partly because it was 1973. You know, it was just because that's where the story spoke. It just kind of, I went there. It's partly based on something that happened to my father in the 60s. So I added a decade. My dad won what I thought was a lifetime supply of aluminum foil, but was in fact a year's supply of aluminum foil. But the idea of it was not very many, which was the joke. His family, working class family, cleared out space for the aluminum foil, and then it was one box. And in my story, I didn't even know. I was telling this class I just visited that I didn't check in with my father about that anecdote. I just took what I remembered and sort of followed it and made it interesting to me. And I thought a lifetime measured out in aluminum foil rolls is so funny and sort of sick. And I loved it, right? And so then I also thought, well, when could that happen? When could there be an encounter between sort of a boy and a salesman, or aluminum foil salesman? Well, maybe 1973, which was, and then, so I don't know, but I think you're right. That is a it's a world before social media. It's a world before a lot of the devices that we're chained to now. But even in this world, I'm interested in something else, like what passes between people that's not technology. I think I don't do a lot with it. Yeah. I'm going to teach a class next semester on point of view, just a workshop with a focus on point of view, because I'm so interested in how we tell stories and and I'm also this idea of our characters have to be likable, relatable. You can't write in a first person if you're a woman writing about a man, writing about I wanted to kind of throw caution to the wind and do what I wanted to do and see about what I could get away with. And I really resist those kind of flattening and I think really just sort of reductive dogma about what people are allowed to write. And I think at the same time, I think we have to examine sort of the choices we make really, really hard. I'm willing to do this and I'm willing to get the flack for it. If I get it wrong. There's also a 16-year-old boy who, a gay boy, is one of the main characters in my novel. So
That's what I was going to ask you. Could you talk a bit about your novel? Mm-hmm. Tell people who don't know what the story is and how you came up with it and all
Sure.
that.
Yeah. So the novel took a long time for me to write. I thought of it as a series of stories, of kind of link stories, which it is. And I was really interested in this idea of runaways. You guys like link stories?
We were talking about them earlier today in workshop.
That's another thing I would love to do, a class of all link stories. Like I'm really interested in sort of novels that are built up of little things, and I'm teaching a book called A Visit from the Goon Squad this semester by Jennifer Egan, which I think is a really exciting kind of example of that form. This novel, I was learning how to write, in some ways, and really kind of learning how to write stories, and I didn't know, it's like I didn't know how to write a story or a novel, so I wrote a bunch of small things that look like stories and put them together so it looked like a novel. But I'm happy with the book. I'm proud of the book, I stand by it, but I think formally it was a bit of an experimentation. I wrote some stories, I thought about point of view as a kind of baton being passed from character to character. And so I thought about, but this book, because it's a series of stories, it took so long to kind of come into, I couldn't see how they were connected, and it took a long time to find a kind of architecture for the whole. And and what happened was, once I realized that there's a girl who goes missing, who's kind of the centerpiece of the book. And the stories move all around in time and space, but at the core of the book, between every chapter, there's a story of this girl, Leonora, and she has gone missing. And the book kind of follows her story in real time. So there's this kind of one story that's sort of the backbone of the book, and then other stories circling around it that all do come together. Maybe not in a wholly satisfying way if you're wanting a kind of nice and sort of everything snaps into place, but I think they're all connected in a way that you can find connections, and yeah, they all kind of, their lives touch each other's. So what I'm doing now is very different. I sort of, first novel is a kind of like point of views all over the place, and this novel that I'm working on is sort of a point of view as an arrow, straight shot, you know? Because I wanted to see, could I maintain the same character's narration over so many pages? That's just not something I've proven to myself I can do, and maybe I can't, we'll see. But that's like, I just wanted to do something different with this other novel.
I have a follow-up question. Both in your story and as you talk about writing, people come here and sometimes I think they want us to tell them how one writes, but what I'm hearing from you, which is lovely, it sounds like the act of creation is you dive into the swimming pool without any idea how to write a novel.
Yeah.
In other words, there are no rules.
There's...
So if you talk about your creative act as an act of not knowing, which runs oppositional to the sense people have from the outside that we know what we're doing.
Yes, it's a real issue. I think it's the sort of secret, the thing that we have to continually talk about is the importance of not knowing when we don't know, and not pretending we know when we don't, and kind of embracing that. Now, I say there's an interview in the back of that edition of the book, like a kind of interview at the end of the book, kind of Q&A with the author, whatnot. And I don't know, I think I said something in there, so if you want to go look at it, something about how when I was training to be a social worker, because I went back to school to get a degree in, to get my MSW in social work, I was going to work as a counselor. I thought that's how I'd support myself as a writer. And I imagined having a private practice and sort of working as a therapist. And in that training, I went to a school that had, in that training, I worked in psychiatric crisis units. I worked in hospitals, I worked with people with psychotic disorders. And I also did therapy with also the worried well or whatever, like the people who are just wanting to talk, but I did a whole range. And when I would sit with somebody, it seemed very clear very early on in a way I could never get in my head as a writer, that as a member of the helping professions, it's all about just not knowing. Like I'm sitting with someone whose story is unknown to me, some intervention is called for, they're in pain, I'm supposed to be helping, and I'm just sort of having to learn how to kind of not know, to be in the presence of someone's uncertainty and sort of wait and listen. And that is the best kind of analog, or the best sort of for writing a novel as I could ever think of, And just that kind of being patient with someone else's, with being patient in a mystery that is someone else's life, that is your character's lives, that is even your own life, if it's a memoir that you're writing. Like how can you kind of not know but be productive in that not knowing? I don't know the answer to that, but I know that as a social worker, when I did that work, and as a teacher, and now as a writer, I'm trying to get kind of more comfortable in that place.
Any other questions?
I really appreciate your good questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to let me read this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.